The ETH spot ETF will happen as well.
Of course.
It'll be later, and everyone's going to, as soon as the Bitcoin one are done, they'll front run it by going to the ETH one because they know that's the next one. We will see that. We will see, the rise of the hedge fund industry, the capital coming in, the pension funds coming in, Matt Halstead and Mike from Texas Teachers are kind of showing the way and how that's done. So they're all coming, and it will all happen over time. The Bitcoin ETF, I don't think of it as a one-off event. People are thinking of it as like this liquidity injection into the crypto economy, and I'm saying it's a trade agreement. Trade agreements really start working when people are starting to get return on their capital in that new economy, and then they pile in. Do you remember when China started opening up and people started putting a little bit of money there? Before you knew it, you'd be in Shanghai and everybody's been posted there, being given $1 billion. Set up an office for us there, figure out how to make money. That's what will come. So I'm less concerned about the start, but this pipe is going to be an important pipe to bring kind of RIAs and others into the space as it moves. And if you think about the halving, it's so beautifully timed. Last time and this time, I can't remember the previous time, but last time is like, okay, we're going to reduce the supply of Bitcoin whilst we're going to jam the maximum amount of fucking money into the system as possible. Here we are again, going into some liquidity, whatever that's going to look like, plus the Bitcoin spot ETF, all around the same time of the halving. It's like, you couldn't ask for a better picture. As you know, if you zoom out, put it on a log chart, it is, right? It does trend perfectly. It's just that the cycles within that trend, when you don't put them on a log chart, look horrific, and most people don't have the stomach for it. You and I have been around this long enough to realize the pain is part of the risk is part of the reward. You have to go through that to have an asset that goes up 20x, each cycle. So I think it's been decoupled for a while, as you say. It feels that new capital's coming into the space because it's moving out of the risk curve. So we saw Bitcoin going up first part of what I call crypto spring. So all year it was Bitcoin, and that was driven by, I think, just alts bleeding and that washing machine. But what we're starting to see is the movement towards the ETF, and that gets front running of capital from other people as well, hedge funds and others. And then eventually we got the news today that BlackRock has probably started to buy some. Who knows how much that is, but let's call it a couple $100 million either way. So the way to think about the ETF, I think, is really useful. Here's the crypto economy, and it has been starved of new capital recently. And the ETF is a trade deal between TradFi, the TradFi economy, and this new economy. So we've just started a trade deal. Doesn't mean we're going to get the trade, but it's looking like we'll start to get foreign direct investment into the crypto economy. What happens then is, how I think about this, my mental model is, okay, so the money goes into Bitcoin first, but everybody who's been in this market has been front running it by owning Bitcoin. So then the next thing they'll go is, well, they're going to do the ETH ETF next.
Of course, an index. An index of the top 50 altcoins, right? Yeah.
It'll go to the ETH ETF, that will run. And then meanwhile, we've got other stories of things that are getting traction, Solana, Chainlink, others that are starting to rise as the capital's coming into the space and people are placing risk bets in things that they think might work in the cycle.
I think that you think bigger than I do. So maybe these things don't surprise you, but never maybe in my bingo card for any time in the future would I have had every presidential candidate who's not 400 years old taking a position on Bitcoin. I understand that Biden and Trump probably won't talk about it much. And Larry Fink going on national TV and calling crypto a flight to quality. In a million years, I don't know that I would have had Larry Fink saying that, especially when the market is down. Although I guess we should, when the market is down is the perfect time for him to say it, but still.
It's really interesting. He won't say these things. He's not like Paul Tudor Jones or a hedge fund manager can pretty much say what he wants. He controls one of the largest financial institutions on earth. A flight to quality tells you that you need one.
Yeah, that's right. He's telling you how screwed you are by calling anything a flight to quality.
And so, I think it's the banking issue is the problem because, everybody saw Bitcoin really started taking off when the banks were struggling. I saw this firsthand in Europe back in 2012 and 13 with Cyprus. Bitcoin exploded because people understood you couldn't keep your money in the bank. And that's when I first got into the whole space. And it's happening in the US again. And people are like, oh, I get it now. But yes, it's a really big statement for Larry Fink to say that. Yeah, you and I can say it all day. It makes no difference. But him, yeah, that's a deal. That's a big deal.
And the presidential candidates, and we're seeing a potentially pro-crypto Speaker of the House if the Republicans can actually get their shit together to put anyone in. I mean, this is main stage, man. We're not the little name on the flyer anymore. We're up at the top of the Coachella, right?
It is. And the reason being is the Democrats, which is a very boomer-driven current cohort of leaders there, are looking after their own, which is the disenfranchised boomers on the coasts. Okay, fine. But there's 86 million millennials who just don't have the same economic interest as those retirees. So I think that this other cohort of politicians is thinking, well, there's a bunch of voters we can get behind a single issue, which I don't care if it's yet another slimy politician with another agenda, at least it's getting the right agenda. Markets almost always go up in the presidential cycle last year. Very simply, more cowbell. Is they want to give out money to everybody who can vote. So they, have you noticed how many of these coincide with recessions? Almost all of these people come in, the 4-year cycle is all the kind of same bloody thing.
I was going to say, so is the same Fed 4-year cycle we just talked about and the Bitcoin halving and the presidential election cycle effectively aligned?
Essentially is. It's all the same bloody thing. And the stimulus always comes at this point. So 2024 should be a lot of stimulus. Then the new government comes in, they produce stimulus. Those seem to be the two big stimulus years. We're coming through the stimulus stopped shrinking year, which was this year, which is the spring, the macro spring or crypto spring. And then we go into the summer. I hadn't actually thought about that. What you want to do is look at things versus Bitcoin and see where things are. Now, ETH has always been very interesting to me because the whole down cycle, it didn't do the down 90% versus Bitcoin. Many of the existing alts do, because we know it's a massive ecosystem. Also, ETH, everything changed for me when it got deflationary in large activity, because actually the biggest activity is in a bull market, so it becomes scarcer in a bull market. That's like, okay, nobody really thought that one through. The other thing is it now has a yield. And if you think of institutions, they like things with yields. So they don't like gold because it doesn't have a yield, ETH does. So ETH has been actually my bigger bet, but I've recently been switching into Solana as my bet.
Can't be bad about that. I don't know when you started recently, but
I started buying Solana last year, June through till December to average. And I just had the feeling, and I looked at the chart and I saw the Solana ecosystem, and you throw all the worst news possible and it's the worst Sam coin, and just
I was just going to say the best argument for Solana is it isn't dead.
That's right. And then I saw people like Tolly, he's just classy. He's just so good. And I'm like, okay, this is really interesting. I'd met him previously and saw the kinds of people he was involved with, and they were like the heads of all of these amazing businesses. I'm like, obviously can't talk about it publicly, but like, okay, this is amazing. And then I learned about, I don't know if have you gone down this fire dancer rabbit hole yet?
I haven't really. Only very superficially.
I have not gone really public on it, but I'll write some stuff out of it because I've been writing about it for the Real Vision Pro Macro people and for Global Macro Investor, but I hadn't even heard about it. But I went to Mainnet, and there's Colleen from Brevin Howard, who's a good friend and an amazing person. She was on stage and she was like, fire dancer, that's obviously a big bet that we've got that we think is really important. I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about, Colleen, but she knows a lot of stuff I don't know. So I'm like, okay, fine. And then Anatoly comes up and he's speaking and he starts talking about fire dancer and, we think it can do 600,000 to 1.2 million TPS. And that, I'm like, what? And I was thinking at the time, maybe it's some sort of layer 2, blah, 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 compromise. So I went back home. I was looking at the charts, which I have been for a long time, of Solana versus ETH and Solana versus Bitcoin. I'm like, this looks like a fucking rocket ship. What is going on here? And so I started looking in and watching the interviews with the Jump trading team who built FireDance and realized it was a separate validator for ETH exchange, for Solana, that exchange, that increases the security of the entire chain itself, and that, yes, these speeds were right because it was being built by people who were trying to build light speed for high frequency trading. And, Tolly's going, yeah, this is the real deal. This is what we should have done in the first place. And I'm like, okay, this is huge.
I mean, that solves the trilemma. Like, we've never heard of a coin where you can get better security with faster speed, right?
No, and the speed here, I mean, just think of the quantum this is. So we've got Solana at supposedly 65,000 TPS. We've got a layer 2 like Polygon at about the same, but less secure than a layer 1. Okay, fine. This is a layer 1 of Solana that does 20x. So they're saying it's fast enough to run the entire securities industry. Twitter only runs at 24,000 TPS. So you can run all of social media, you can run high frequency trading, you can do anything. So all I think is use case. Use cases explode and it just becomes very interesting. So that's why I'm very bullish in